What's good, YouTube? It's your boy back at it again with another video. In this one, we're about to be moving, grooving, shaking a bit. I'm making like a smooth, old school kind of G-Funk West Coast beat. I actually just recorded this entire tutorial and didn't record the desktop audio, so I'm redoing it. So this beat was inspired by a lot of like old school West Coast production. I've been listening to a lot of that kind of stuff lately. Like Warren G, Nate Dogg, Above the Law, DJ Quick, Dr. Dre, like all that old school West Coast kind of music. But I wanted to give it kind of like an updated vibe, so I was going with like sort of like a G Perico, Larry June, Kalan Frfr kind of vibe. So let's get into it. The first instrument I started with was this piano here. It's actually from Splice. It's from this Soul Surplus kit. It's in G flat minor, aka F sharp minor. Here's how it sounds. I added a little reverb on this just to push it back in the mix and make it sound a little bit wider. And then I added isotope vinyl just to give it sort of that old school vintage vibe. I like to use IZ vinyl a lot. I just use the effect like real subtly though. I used a little bit of the warmth depth and then like the vinyl noise. The tape saturation stuff sounds cool, but don't overdo it because it could really kind of make it sound weird. I mean, it's all preference, but if you're going with like if you want it to sound more like realistic, don't go too crazy with these effects and make it like too wobbly and stuff. So the next sound we added was this bass, and there's actually two layers for it, but I started with this one. So the pattern is actually more simple than it seems. I started with just these notes here. And then this part at the end is kind of just like changing up. I added in a lot of those slide notes. I like those kind of notes, and I noticed a lot of the old school G-Funk beats like have a lot of that going on in them. But the pattern is really just these notes. See, it just repeats. And then this part I kind of like changed them up. There's a little change at the end. And this is just this preset from Diva, HS model K12. And then make sure that you've got the mode set to legato. That's how it's going to do like the slide stuff. It's either going to be called portamento, mono, or legato. And most plugins will have like an option for this. And so that sound was sounding cool, but I wanted it to have a little bit more low end. So I layered it with this sub bass from Purity. And it's just playing the same pattern. This is just the sine bass from Purity, but I also turned on the slide on here. So on Purity, if you go to the edit tab, it's this glide thing right here. I always click it to auto. I don't know if you actually need that, but you turn up the time here. Purity, this effect is like really, really strong. So you only want to turn it up a little bit. If you turn it like way up here, it's going to sound super weird. See, it sounds bad. And so just use this effect like a little bit on Purity, and it'll make it do the slide thing that works on any of the sounds in Purity. And so for that, I didn't do too much mixing. I just put it in mono and then cut out some of the high end. The next sound we added in was this lead from Expand. So this pattern is definitely took me the longest to come up with. I kind of messed with it for a while. I started off by just playing in some of these notes. But yeah, it kind of took a while to get it right. but I added in a lot of the little slidey notes and stuff, those little extra ones like that to make it wobble. And this is actually a preset from my Expand bank. There's a link in the bio. If you use Expand, this is like one of my favorite plugins. Yeah, this is a preset from my kit that's in there though. I tweaked a little bit of the stuff on here. I think I turned up the cutoff and turned down the glide time, and then I just muted the delay that's on the plugin because I added another one on the mixing. So for this one, same thing. I added isotope vinyl to pretty much all of the instruments. I also added it to the bass that I had too. I forgot to mention that. Just real subtle, like same thing with the piano. Just a little bit on all of the instruments adds up to like changing the whole sound of the beat. So keep that in mind. And then I just added a little bit of EQ. And then the craziest thing I did probably was this delay. The delay is actually side chaining from the Fruity Peak controller. I think I showed this in one of my other tutorials, but I use this for a lot of sounds. This is how I side chain anything in FL Studio. But this works really good on like synth leads. I use it on basses sometimes, and it's also a real common thing that engineers do on vocals too. So if you mix vocals or anything like that, this is a pretty cool effect to use. But basically what's happening is this mix knob right here is linked to the Fruity Peak controller. And so the way you do that is you open the Peak controller in FL Studio, and then you right click on the knob that you want to link it to. You go link to controller, link it to Peak. Don't do Peak and LFO, don't do LFO, just do Peak. Click this little arrow here, do inverted, and then click accept. And so what this is going to do basically is when the synth is playing, it's going to turn down the delay. And then when the synth stops, it's going to turn it back up. So you'll see this knob going up and down when it starts playing. And so that's just a good trick to have the delay on something like this where there's like a lot of notes going on. It makes it sound a little bit less muddy. The next things I added were this bell, and then I layered it with the chime sound. But I started with this. And this is the classic Purity Vibra hand bell. Classic Purity sound. And I didn't do too much to it. I just panned it a little bit, added isotope vinyl again. Like I said, I added it on pretty much all the instruments on this beat. And then I used Fruity Stereo Enhancer to widen it up a little bit and then pan it to the left more. And so I was liking that sound, but I wanted to like layer it with something else to make it sound a little bit more like it was like a, I don't know, like a real instrument or something. So I layered it with this wind chime sound. And if you listen to a lot of my beats, I use that sample all the time. I'll just put it in like different places. I don't know why, I just love how it sounds. But together, here's how they sound. And so it just fit because the way the wind chime thing is, it's like going down too. So I thought it fit cool in the melody. The last thing I added was this string here. And this is actually a one shot. I like to use one shots, especially for strings, just because the way it sounds more like it's like a sample being played. I know some people like don't like one shots or whatever. I don't mind them. I mean, it's just like a different vibe with the sound. So it depends on the vibe that you're going for, what you want to use or whatever. Because the one shots are definitely going to sound less realistic, but sometimes that's like the vibe that you want. So it's just playing two notes. I added a little bit of reverb on it just to kind of widen it out and give it a little more texture. And this just comes in before the hook and then it plays like through the hook. And so all together, here's how the instruments sound. right, let's get into the drums. So I started off with these two hi-hats. This one's just playing a two-step all the way through, and this one's playing like another pattern, so it adds a little bit of extra bounce to it. Same thing with the mixing on here. I didn't add anything. I just panned one of them a little bit and made sure that the volumes were straight. So for the drums on this beat, I really kind of kept them simple. Like I said in the beginning, like I was going for sort of like the vintage, like West Coast vibe. So you got to think like in those old beats, they weren't producing them on like software like we have today. So you couldn't go in and like zoom in and cut up the hi-hat super small and stuff like that. Like most of the time they were either making them on like workstation keyboards, so they had to actually play it in, or they were using like drum machines. And the drum machines back then, it didn't go as small as they do now. So like you could only have notes on certain spots. And so that's why I kind of didn't add any crazy rolls and stuff. I did a little bit with the clap just to sort of like modernize it a little, but I wanted it to sound like an old school kind of beat. And so next I added in the kick. Again, I kept it simple, nothing like too crazy with the rolls or anything. I just messed with the velocity. Changing the velocities on your drum sounds, like especially on like kicks and hi-hats, can add a lot to the beat to really sauce it up, so keep that in mind. For the kick, I didn't add anything. I left the volume and everything the same. I just turned it to mono and mixed everything else kind of around the kick. I liked how it sounded, so I just left it. Next, I added in this crash here. And you want to make sure that you have your volume envelope set like this. If you go into the plugin, you go to this thing right here, make it into a little square like this, and that's what's going to make the sounds cut when they play. And for anyone that doesn't know, you can also take a note, and if you hold Alt and pull it all the way till it's really small like that, it's going to make the note play out all the way, instead of like this. When you make it all the way small, it's just going to tell it to keep playing. That's how you do that effect. That's a super common effect on like 808s, crashes, just any kind of instrument, open hi-hats too. Lastly, I just added in a few perks. We got like 3 different sounds, and I just use these to kind of fill in like the rhythm and add like a little change up in some parts. We got this little triangle that plays on the beginning of every beat. We got the classic metronome sound. I love this sound. And then we got this little shaker noise. So all together, here's how those sound. And same thing for these. I didn't really add anything onto them. I just panned them, made sure that the volumes were good, and left them how they were. And then lastly, I added in the clap. I pretty much always add in the clap last when I'm making a beat, because I feel like if you can make the drums bounce before you add in like the kick and the clap and stuff, then you're going to be good. Because like the clap is really just going to kind of like fill everything in. But this is actually 3 claps that I layered. I've got one with like that's like a big reverb, and that just plays on certain beats. And then I got these 2 just layered. And so all together, here's how they sound. It gives it kind of a good like vintage sounding vibe. For these sounds, I routed them all to the same mixer track. I like to do this when I layer drum sounds like this. I usually don't do it with melodies and stuff, but with drums, I like to layer them all together, so they kind of like combine into one sound. And all I did was add just a little bit of reverb on it. And that was just for these claps here. I'll show you how it sounds without it. And the last things I added in for the drums were this scratcher noise and these effects. So we've got the basic old school scratcher. Just plays 4 beats right there at the end and kind of helps the beat transition. Then I got this effect here. I use this effect all the time in beats. It's from one of the Big White Beats kits. I feel like pretty much every producer should have these kits. They're like all over on Reddit. So if you don't have these kits, like I don't know what you're doing. Highly recommend. These are just like iconic kits that tons of people have used. And then I have this shaker effect that hits just when the hook drops. And I added a bit of delay on that. Nothing on the scratcher. I just panned it and turned it down a bit. All right, all together, here's how the drums sound. And this is how everything sounds together with the melody. So for the layout, I tried to keep everything fairly simple. If you listen to a lot of these old school kind of beats, the drum pattern will pretty much stay the same like through the entire song. And what really changes up and stuff is like a lot of the melodies kind of will change up and come in and out and stuff like that. So I tried to keep the drums pretty much the same going all the way through. I had a few parts where they like change up and stuff just because I didn't want it to be the exact same the whole time. But I made this part where it drops out and then it comes back basically to the same exact pattern in the verse. We just don't have like the strings and stuff in there. And I added a few parts too where the instruments and the bass will lead in. This is a really good way to kind of sauce up your beats. All this is right here is just the end of this pattern, and I just took it and then dragged it out like this so that it comes in like before. And this is a really easy way to sauce up your beats. You could even go more in depth with it if you wanted. You could like go into this pattern, make it unique, and change it up like even more. But for this, I thought it sounded cool with that, and so I just kind of left it. But that's something to really like keep in mind, and it's something that I really like struggled with when I was first starting out making beats. But every instrument doesn't need to come in on like the downbeat. Like you don't need to start every pattern right here. You know, you could have melodies that come in later on. I did the same thing with the synth too. It doesn't start right here. You know, I could have started the pattern here, but instead, you know, you give it a little bit of room, and it's just going to make your beats sound more musical. It's something that's kind of hard to explain because there's really no like rules to it. You kind of got to just feel it or whatever. But try not to lock yourself into like making everything on like the grid and on like the same exact beat and stuff like that, because it's really going to add a lot of like vibe to your beats and stuff. But yeah, other than that, the layout's pretty simple. There's a part here too where it drops out. But yeah, like I said, I tried to keep the layout pretty simple. As always, it's just kind of a lot of small things that add up to like the bigger picture. So always try and remember that when you're making beats. Sometimes subtle small things can add a lot to the beat. For the mastering, as always, I use Fruity Soft Clipper and Ozone 8. I'll show you how it sounds before and after. Before you throw on like all the mastering plugins, you really want to make sure that the mix is sounding good, because the mastering stuff is going to bring everything up. So it's going to bring up the stuff that sounds good, and it's also going to bring up the stuff that sounds bad. So if you've got instruments that are too loud or like too harsh sounding, it's really going to come out like when you put this stuff on. Okay, and so like a lot of people will make the mistake of thinking that they need to mess with like the settings and like EQ on the master and all this different stuff to get the beat to sound good, but it's really all in the mix. It's all in this stuff. And a lot of the mixing is, especially when you're doing like hip hop stuff like this, where you're just working with like samples, it's really all in the levels and just the initial quality of the sounds. Mixing does get a lot more complex when you've got like live instruments and you're recording people live and stuff like that. But if you're just working in an FL Studio, try and keep it simple. A really good thing that helps me out is like comparing my mixes to other songs that I like. It does take a lot of time to like understand what a good mix actually sounds like. And some people kind of just like naturally have that and others don't. I definitely don't. It took me a pretty long time to get even like somewhat good at mixing, and I would say I'm still not really that good. But yeah, just, practice it. Try and really keep it simple in the beginning. Like, you don't need to go crazy with the effects and stuff. Just keep it basic. Just use reverb, delay, a little bit of EQ, and you'll be all right. So listen to this before and after with the effects, and notice how the perk sounds, like the hi-hats and stuff like that, really come out more. All right, guys, and I think that is going to wrap it up for this tutorial. As always, if the video helped you out, drop a like, drop a sub, drop a comment. Please just use this for inspiration. Don't straight up copy it. I see a lot of people that really just copy the tutorials, and, it is what it is. I get it. We've all done it. But I hope that you just use this for like inspiration, maybe a little information. Hopefully you learned a couple good tips. But yeah, I'm going to let the beat play out. Until the next one, peace.